Anyway, yeah, so wanted to just jump right in and say congratulations, Michael, to you and to me and to the whole team, because this past weekend was the Origins Game Fair. And for any of our listeners who weren't aware, the Captain's Log solo RPG was nominated as a Best RPG Corp. Woohoo! Some stiff competition, including our recent guest, Matt Forbeck. His was up, as well as a couple others, and unfortunately we did not win, but that's okay. The competition was awesome. I am so proud that the team got recognized with the nomination. At least it's always great to be nominated for an Origins, because you get that that free publicity bump. But I was talking right before we started that I had this thing, like it's one of the precious things that we've worked on over the last many. It's almost second nature now for me to throw it in my bag, because my family and I went on a mini vacation last week, and I was packing up my backpack with my laptop and my other things I needed to take with me, and I threw it right there in the bag. Didn't think twice about it, and I actually flipped through it a couple of times in the hotel room, read a couple of sections of it, a couple of chapters, just to refresh my memory, but also just to keep the creative engine growing, because I'm trying to focus a little bit on my own fiction right now, in addition to working on STA. And there's great writing advice in here, just in general, great writing advice. And the more I read it, the more it sinks in there.
Well, congratulations to you, Jim. I know that when this was all being ideated, now what's going on 3 years ago, and we were like, is this actually going to work? And look, you're getting an award now.
Yeah. Got nominated for an award. And like I said online, biggest thrill for me is all the fan feedback that we get saying, oh, I always wanted to write a story. I didn't have the tools to do it. I didn't have permission to do it. No one really encouraged me. And I got this book, and it, like, right from the beginning of the page, it said, no, here's all the tools you need. Go make something cool. Go tell a cool start. Go create a cool Star Trek story, and then share it. And that's the important thing. Share it so that we can read it and enjoy it and read more. And then to tie in our guest for this week, BC has added Captain's Log to her awesome character builder. So now you can use that builder for STA and for Captain's Log, and just use that engine even more. So those of you who are looking at Captain's Log and feeling completely intimidated by all the character generation stuff, don't worry, BC's got you covered. You can just go use that character builder app for freezies, and go make your character, and then just jump right into the story.
Oh yeah, we probably should introduce ourselves. Why don't you start, Jim?
Introduce ourselves, yeah. So why don't you kick us off, Michael, as always, and then I'll jump in, and then we'll introduce BC.
All right, everybody, our conversation continues. It's like you walked into a cafe and you sat at our table, and here we are talking. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures, and of course, lead writer on Captain's Log. Woohoo! That got the nomination. I also am a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for both aforementioned properties. And of course, this show is not a show unless we have Jim Johnson.
Hey, everybody, Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. Love these many years, 8 years strong. Co-host on this here show with Michael, 140 something episodes. I keep losing count. A whole bunch of episodes. I think we're pushing 3 years now worth of episodes. So super excited to be here. Super excited to be talking about Captain's Log and STA. We got a cool topic for you all tonight, and I want to introduce our returning guest, BC Holmes. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
Sure. I'm BC Holmes. I'm the current maintainer of the Star Trek Adventures Character Creator app, available at sta.bchomes.org. And as always, I'm constantly adding new features to the tool. I think I was on here just a few months ago talking about the latest batch of stuff, and new stuff is being added even since then.
Yep, you're a show regular now. You're almost becoming like Ed McMahon on the Johnny Carson show. which is, I love it. I love our regulars. And in fact, we have such a cool subject. BC comes up with some of the best subjects that we brought onto the show for us to riff about and to really spark the creative juices. In fact, I'm going to do a little test. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. Those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, I'll explain in a moment what it is. But I just have to test Jim and BC at this point and move my head aside and ask if they know what this creature is behind me, what species and what TV show it appeared on. Anyone?
I know. And in fact, they're on my list.
Awesome. Okay, good. Okay, so just to launch into this, what we're doing today, which is totally fun, we're doing one and done species that have shown up just once in a Star Trek show and that made us insatiably curious for when they're going to come back. And so BC had this idea where we're like, hey, let's talk about our favorite one-hit wonders, and then we'll riff a little bit about how we might introduce them back into the show. So BC, can you tell us what you know about this creature? And no, Jim, it's not species 8472.
Sure. I don't think they're named in the show, but I think that the Memory Alpha article about them refers to them as the shroomies. And they're the ones who appear in the Enterprise episode Silent Enemy. And that's the episode in which the Enterprise gets out into the world. They're attacked by this mysterious alien who never really communicates with them. And that's the moment they realize we really should have come up with phasers before we left space dock.
Exactly. Do you remember the show now, Jim?
I do not. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch Enterprise one more time. I think I when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's from Voyager, just the way the CGI looks. But no, it's Enterprise. Interesting. Okay, well, it gives me some research.
It's actually a really good episode too, Jim. So we could talk about it, BC, why it's such a good episode. I actually thought it was a really good, creepy, almost like space Close Encounters type episode, like a really classic Steven Spielberg idea. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I mean, I think that the choice to create a brand new species for that episode was a really good choice, because if it had been the Klingons that were attacking them or stuff like that, we would know who they were, and we would therefore necessarily not feel as intimidated by them, because we know that, the characters have routinely fought against Klingons. We know they've routinely fought against X species or Y species. And so by having the species that we didn't know and knew nothing about, and in fact would not communicate in any way whatsoever, I just thought that heightened the sort of tension of the episode and led to sort of fear and uncertainty about whether or not they were going to win it in the end.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised Star Trek doesn't do more of this, where we already know that alien abduction is a big subject for anyone who likes UFOs. And I felt that they were the first time humans were coming into contact with those people who were abducting us, because the premise of the show was the ship was chasing them. It would do hit and run attacks. Finally, in Act 3, they get on board the ship. Through mysterious means, the phasers don't work against them. And I felt this was us meeting the pilots of the UFO originally. And so where could this go in future episodes? Like, are they still on? And the Vulcans didn't even know who they were. Remember, they weren't in the Vulcan database. So let's talk about where would you BC, and then you will have you, Jim, riff on it too. With characters like this, where would you have them come back in maybe an STA game?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a temptation to think that because they're an Enterprise era alien, that if we use them in the TOS or the TNG era, that we think, oh, we must know about them by now. But I think that one of the things that makes them really interesting is so little was just determined about them. They could be anywhere. It could be that they've only shown up like once or twice in the entire time since their first appearance. And so I think, they're best used in much the same way that we saw them in that original Enterprise episode, that suddenly they just come out of nowhere. They're ransacking the ship or stealing stuff, etc., getting onto the ship through means unknown, and just being mysterious and not knowing anything about them.
Yeah, I mean, going to what Jim just said too, Jim, riff off this. What if this was an early version of species 8472?
Yeah, certainly it could be, or it's its own thing, right? I'm thinking as a game master, if I know that my group game, and they wouldn't be any the wiser, right?
I'm going to ask you to repeat one more time, Jim. I'm sorry, you had some audio cut out on that. If you said about your group, what about it?
Okay, so I think I'm having some audio issues. Why don't you two chat amongst yourselves? I'm going to reset my router, and I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, that's fine. I'll introduce one of my species after we talk about this then. Yeah, so I was thinking it could be an early species 8472 because they are shapeshifters, and maybe they decided, let's not deal with these biologics or, yet. But I also would probably bring them in as horror, like maybe this species is all about isolationism, and they are like, we're not ready to meet other species. Maybe they are mobile through space, so they don't have a planet. I thought maybe that's the case. And maybe they're constantly always going out into the boondocks. They're like, let's get away from civilization as much as possible. So this is probably the most wide open species, in my opinion, that a game master could bring in because we don't know nothing about them, right? And their technology was pretty advanced.
Indeed, and I think that's part of the interesting tension about them. Like their technology was a little bit unknown, but not so advanced that they didn't seem like they were an impenetrable species or an unbeatable species. Like one of the species I added to my list because I think they could be interesting was the Metrons. The problem with the Metrons is like they're presented as these, they're from the episode Arena, the first one where we meet the Gorn, and they're the people who forced Captain Kirk and the Gorn captain to fight against each other. But the problem with species like that is like they're presented as being incredibly powerful and highly advanced species. And you wonder, how could you possibly defeat those? The shroomies, I think, are interesting in that, they're not that advanced. They're just a little bit more advanced than we want them to be. And therefore that's a threat. But we know that they can be fought against.
Yeah. What if in a story too, a future crew got a lead on them, and they're probably in the Federation database and Starfleet database, like, hey, watch out for these people. Imagine if a team got a lead on them, and it's almost like that episode of Voyager, the 37s. Imagine if they came to a planet that was composed entirely of abducted individuals, like a petri dish, and these species just study them.
That's an interesting idea.
Imagine if you ran into like Shaka Zulu and all these people who maybe had mysterious disappearances through time. Even I'm going to go all the way back to like Enoch, from biblical reference. You could like throw in some really cool historical characters that have become a common language. I mean, I better shut up so I don't ruin this for my players. Cool. All right. Good. I'm glad we both met up on that one. I'm going to jump us over to another choice that we can talk about. I've talked about it on the show before, but I have to say I'm really in love with the species, and it's from Voyager season 1, and it's the Sakarians. Do you remember them, BC?
Oh, yeah. They were the ones who had the 40,000 light year teleporter.
That's
but
right.
You had to actually be in orbit around their planet in order to do that.
Exactly. They had a spatial trajectory.
Yeah. For me, like that was one of the strongest early episodes of Trek, of Voyager, that is to say, because it introduced that sort of conflict between the Maquis and Tuvok and Janeway. Mm-hmm. Like for the species that, just seemed to be entirely hedonistic and uninteresting and uninterested in anything other than, good wine and good conversation. The fact that they created that sort of tension on the Voyager was fascinating.
Oh, that speech at the episode at the end where Janeway confronts Tuvok and she's in tears almost. That is one of some of the best acting in that first season there. So, and the thing that was special about their spatial trajectory technology was their planet's core had the mineral necessary in order to make it possible for them to go around 40,000 light years around their planet. Do you remember the next time that they were referenced?
I do. It was the first season of Star Trek Picard, when it was indicated that the Sakarians, possibly not all of them, but maybe all of them, had been assimilated by the Borg. And the Borg now had the technology for far-reaching transportation.
Oh, heartbreaking. Because to think that such an amazing species, Jim, we're talking about Sakarians, welcome back, which was my pick for one and done species, even though they did show up in Picard season 1 by reference with the spatial trajector. That hurt me so much that such an advanced, beautiful species were destroyed by the Borg. And I've talked with Jim riffing before about that. It would be so cool to bring back the refugees of Sakaria into a modern game. And what they're facing with the fall of their amazing civilization, but they have all this knowledge of amazing technology, maybe wanting revenge on the Borg. The Sakarians are somebody, even maybe a Sakarian to join a Starfleet crew as a refugee. These would all be, fantastic stories to maybe pursue with your group. All right, Jim, we lost you, but let's go jump to your one and done species that you'd like to see come back in a RPG game.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear my audio better now. We'll see how this works. I think I just had to reset everything and make it work. So sorry about that, technological issues, but hopefully resolved. I think my interestingly, a bunch of the species I was thinking about that were one and dones all relate to time travel or alternate universes in one way or another. And the first one on my list was the I think they're called the Devidians, from the Next Generation two-parter Time Zero. There was these funky alien species who were into time travel, and they had that one awesome two-parter, and then you never saw them again. I think they show up in some of the novels,
Coda,
or in the Coda series. Yeah, but I would love to play with them again, and just time travel in general is such an easy. I don't want to say easy, but it's such a reliable Star Trek trope that you can rely on and just dump into any episode and do something interesting with it, right? But the Devidians, I thought that two-parter was really cool and fun, and if you're running a long campaign, like a large size campaign, it's always nice to drop in a time travel or alternate universe episode every now and then, just to shake things up, just to see what happens. And I think the Devidians would be the one of the go-tos I would use just to play with them and build them out a little bit. Because they were only in 2 episodes, and given the novels, of course, we could build off of that. But still, there's lots of fertile ground to play with them and expand their lore.
Yeah, BC, did you have a chance to see read the novels Coda from David Mack?
I did.
It's David Mack, Dayton Ward, and Candido. Was it Candido? I think so, but I have to go back and look again. But Jim, did you have a chance to read those? How they built out the Devidians there?
I will admit I read the first one and then half of the second one, and then I got consumed by some STA product and just have not gotten back to them yet. So I will get there.
Yeah.
But don't feel free to spoil me. I don't mind.
I won't spoil it, except I'll say that besides expanding on the Devidians in an amazing way, they also expand on the Traveler, Wesley Crusher. And it's one of the best epics. And what they basically, the goal of it, the goal of it was to wrap up all of the novel series using the Devidians as the crux so that people could start new novel series without having to worry about all those past novels. And I think the craftsmanship behind this was totally epic. So Devidians, didn't even think about them. Why don't we have a supplement just for Devidians?
We just didn't have time, no pun intended. I think, even after 7 years of doing STA, there were still supplements on my wish list that we just didn't have the publishing slots to get to. And then, of course, we decided to go forward with second edition, and then second edition commanded a lot of attention. And now we're heading into second edition, and now there's a fresh opportunity. Knock on wood, all things being equal, that we have another 7 years ahead of us. Who knows? Maybe we'll finally get to a time travel / alternate universes supplement. I would love to do one. I just have to see how it happens. See if we can get there.
And as people are listening, I don't want only GMs to focus on this as we move on to BC's next pick, but I want players to listen to this too, because it's not only about GMs saying, hey, you know what? I can write this. I have enough, base information in Memory Alpha or from an episode to jumpstart a story with a little meat that makes my players feel like this is part canon. But for players, you could also pick to play one of these as a species that's joining the Federation or joining a game. So it gives you wide berth to create a whole background and world building for a species that only showed up once also. It's very wide open. So I just want GMs and players to pay attention to what we're talking about and maybe do some research on these species. BC, who's your next pick?
Oh man, I was going to use one pick, but there's a different segue that I think might be interesting here. And they're an almost completely unknown species that we saw. And the reason I'm going to mention them is because you were just talking about building a whole sort of background world and background culture of these things. And so the species I'm going to refer to is the Valyrians. The Valyrians appear in a very small role in an episode of Deep Space Nine called Dramatis Personae. And this is an episode in which all of the crew of the Deep Space Nine suddenly start behaving oddly. And the way that Kira starts behaving oddly is she becomes really obsessed with the rules regarding this Valyrian freighter that's docked at the station. And she's obsessed with the idea that it might be potentially carrying energy fuel, or a form of energy fuel that they had previously traded to the Cardassians, and therefore they're necessarily sketchy. The reason I picked them is because in a campaign that I'm running, they're one of the anchor points of that particular campaign. And so that whole campaign has been dealing with the fact that there's like 4 worlds that are mentioned in that episode that are allies of the Valyrians. My campaign deals with one of those 4 worlds. The Valyrians are like a major species that influence the comings and goings of that particular world. And the part of that I really love is exactly what you're describing, is that we get a species that existed for 4 minutes of screen time at best. And we're actually trying to pull out, okay, so what's the culture like? What are the key issues? What's the politics going on here? How are these trade relationships between some of these worlds influencing each other, et cetera?
Did they ever show their faces?
They appear on a screen for like 30 seconds or something like that. In fact, I think, if you try to go to the Memory Alpha article about them, like the image of their face is distorted because you sort of see the camera shot from a strange angle, et cetera, because you only ever see Kira talking through a monitor at them on their ship, et cetera.
I love stuff like that, because then you could decide if you only have a head, maybe they have crab bodies, snake bodies. You could really take it out for world building.
Very much so.
Cool.
There's a I'm probably going to get really nerdy here for a second, but there's one other thing I think is really interesting about them, is that just because of the nature of doing a TV show, because the episode is about their ship, or that one subplot is about their ship, we see their ship docked to the Deep Space Nine. Now, they didn't build a whole model for the Tellarian ship. What they did is they reused a model they had previously used for the Tellarians in an episode of TNG. But that kind of brings up interesting points. Like, why does the Valyrian ship look like the Tellarian ship? Well, if you look at the star charts, like their worlds aren't all that far away from each other. Maybe there's a trade relationship there. Maybe they sell spaceships from one species to the other, et cetera. And you could just start imagining all these interesting possibilities of what's going on in that corner of the Alpha Quadrant. I just think that's really neat.
I love stuff like that you're pulling all that together from maps and shows, and that apocrypha, I guess you would call it, the fact that the ships are similar. I love stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think one of the things
good
that we've really glommed onto is like when Star Trek takes a species and they build out so much more of it, that we just really love that. When they introduced the Ferengi on TNG, they weren't necessarily the most popular species to ever be created. But then when we had Quark as a recurring character on Deep Space Nine, we suddenly developed the whole Ferengi culture and the rules of acquisition and all those other aspects of Ferengi culture. Suddenly they were really fleshed out and they were interesting, and people, liked the species more and wanted to like play those characters, etc. I just think that's really awesome.
Yeah, and that's why I really wish that some of the new series that are coming up, Starfleet Academy, and then any new series that come along, I really hope that the powers that be decide to make one of the main characters a Tellarite, because even with Jenkin Pog being a main character in Prodigy, he's a Tellarite who didn't really realize he was a Tellarite, right? So he doesn't have the knowledge of the whole backstory of the Tellarites, and I want there to be a main character because I want to get that world building. I want to know the lore about one of the 4 founding species of the Federation, right? We get a little bit of them in Enterprise, and we get a little bit of them in Discovery and then Strange New Worlds, but like not a main character, right? And I'd love to see a main character. And to extend that even further, I would love to see more on the Andorians, right? Like I know we got a lot of Shran in Enterprise, but I want more. Especially, I would love to see if canonically they fold in a lot of the Andorian elements from the novels, because the novels do in my opinion, a great job of fleshing out the 4 genders of the Andorian race and how difficult it is for them to manage to procreate, and how there's this whole genetic issue with their species. I mean, that's just fascinating, fertile ground for storytelling that absolutely deserves to be on screen somewhere. And I would just love to see the Tellarites and the Andorians especially fleshed out in much greater detail beyond what we're able to do in an RPG or whatever. So I would love to see a player, in some future campaign of mine, to really take one of those 2 species and dig into them and just really add some world building. But we'll see what happens.
We'll have to have a show just for that too.
One for each one.
I think that raises an interesting point about the sort of species that you want to use as player species, because you want to explore that particular species as a player, and then the species you want to use as sort of adversarial species, or maybe even just background dressing in a particular adventure or story that your characters are going up against.
Exactly. All right, let's keep it going. I have one more that I am going to offer and see if anybody remembers who they are. It's one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek ever. Do you all know who the Voth are? See, Jim, you need to watch more Voyager.
I remember the Voth.
Okay, BC, tell us.
You tell us.
Okay. So this episode was so important just from a social standpoint too, about crossing science and religion. And the Voth were this episode was called Distant Origins, and it was basically the dinosaurs who had came off the planet Earth before the Ice Age of whenever, millions of years ago, had bravely gone into space and created an amazingly advanced civilization. In fact, so advanced they could actually teleport and transport entire starships. They transported Voyager into their huge, ginormous hangar bay, almost a Dyson sphere of a hangar bay. And they only showed up in this one episode, but it was so provocative. The argument was so good. I constantly wondered, the people who were arguing that, hey, humans and dinosaurs have a similar origin from the same planet. We come from the same planet, though we're different species. What happened to them? They were silenced through religious oppression, but they had to create a movement. And I want to know what that movement is. And maybe was there a Voth contingent who escaped and joined the Federation? And then maybe the Voth later on hunt them down, because I'm scared of the Voth technology. What little we saw of it, they're I think they could take on a Borg cube. I really do. With how powerful their ship was. So the Voth, what do you think, BC, if you remember them?
Yeah, totally. I think that with part of what you said there, I think raises an interesting point for me, which is like that idea that they are a society that has these visions in it, and you can just imagine how different power dynamics are going on within the society, and I think there's a lot of fruitful opportunity for stories there, as you were suggesting, like dealing with particular segments who've broken away from other segments, etc.
And like you were saying too, is they sometimes can present an amazing adversary. In fact, the character, her name was Odala. She was kind of the religious political leader. She was played by Conchetta Tomei, and I'm wondering if that's any relation to Marissa Tomei. But Conchetta Tomei, that actor who plays this character, she was so believable. And to me, it's like, oh, that's a villain I want to bring back and be a major adversary against my crew at some point. If I play like a Delta Fringe of the Delta Quadrant type of campaign. Jim, do you remember this character at all?
I vaguely remember watching the episode when we were working on the Delta Quadrant source book, but there's so much Star Trek, I don't remember everything. But no, just listening to you, that would be a cool player character to play a Voth that's maybe a envoy or a representative to the Federation or to the Klingons, or I mean whatever. Because that's something like if a player watches the episode and says, "Oh, that's a really cool species," and wants to play it, they have the opportunity to do all that world building based on what they saw in the episode and then go on from there. And I love it when players take that kind of initiative to not just play something cool and different, but also to invest the effort into doing some world building and to add something new to the tapestry, even though it's just for the love and it's just for the campaign. It's just like, oh, that's just cool stuff, and it sparks the joy in my my writer brain, right? Because I'm a world builder. We're all world builders, right, in different degrees. And just see someone else do it, and then be able to add that into our campaign. I mean, who knows where the story could go from there, right? It could be a whole Voth centered campaign, or it could turn into one, right? If you wanted it to. It's cool. There's just so many cool little nuggets spread all over the Star Trek franchise that you can pick up and play with.
Well, what's cool about the three I was thinking about between the Shroom Heads, the Sakarians, and the Voth is if you are choosing to be a player character with this, you actually come in with knowledge of technology the Federation doesn't have. So that kind of gives you a cool focus or edge or talent right off the bat that makes you of value to a crew.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the example I was going to use earlier before I suddenly pulled out the Valyrians is I think might be interesting to you, Michael, because I remember some shows that you were doing maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. You were very interested in having court-martial episodes. And I thought, who would be great in a court-martial episode? The Shellak from the episode Ensigns of Command, where, they were obsessively legalistic and had documented absolutely everything in a legal accord with the Federation. Like, what if you had to have a court-martial episode and they were the opponents or something like that?
Well, that was only one episode they were in?
Only one episode. They've never returned.
Were they ever referenced in other episodes?
I think they've been referenced in an episode or two, but we've only ever seen them show up in an episode.
Just the once, yeah. They may have been referenced in one other episode, and then they were referenced probably in a couple novels, where they say, oh well, we're gonna get the Shellak to come involved and get involved or whatever. But no, I think they were only on screen that one time.
To your point, then that would make a great mini campaign. Again, imagine if the goal was your crew is on trying to establish diplomatic relations with them. So it's a crew of lawyers, a Federation lawyers in the ship. I know, what would you have to call it? The USS Thurgood Marshall or something like. That'd be totally cool. I love that idea. All right, Jim, I think it's your turn. What's another one and done?
Oh man, there's so many good ones. I think honestly, I would want to take the Squire of Gothos from the original series and really play with that. Was he a proto Q? Was he his own omnipotent being kind of thing? Like what as Trelane was his name, right? Yeah, Trelane. Well, like, what's his deal? What I think his parents showed up at the end. His parents punished him at the end. It's like, and I know there's like a lot of fan conversation about, oh, he was actually a Q, but they didn't before they created the Q, and because he's got the same kind of Q-like tendencies. And I'm like, really? I mean, we've got so many different omnipotent species in Star Trek. They could be their own thing. They may not necessarily be Q, because like you got Kevin Uxbridge, right? The Dowd. He's got his own omnipotence going on. You got the Q, and then you got the Iconians and the Herc, and there's just so many. But I think the Squire got Trelane as a player character would be fun, especially if he's like, got blocks on his powers, or if his powers are being, controlled somehow or something. It just to add more flesh and world building around that that species, right? Like what's their story, right? That's where I would want to dig into, is like what made him do what he did and made him function, you know?
Is this different? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little confused. Is this different than the one who played the baby, the child character? Was that also a one hit? Is that the same character or different?
That's different.
The baby character was the Phasarians.
Yeah.
From the Corbomite maneuver.
That
another good species, another good one-off species. Yeah.
And there was a novel about them too. There was also a novel about them. But so that remind me, that species, they were kind of like Q2, weren't they also pretty powerful?
I thought they were just, differently advanced.
Differently, yeah. They had that really cool spaceship, and he used a puppet to kind of like be his face on the screen and stuff. Incidentally, that was Clint Howard, and Clint Howard is a young man or a young boy, and he's been in like every Star Trek series since then as a cameo or something. But anyway,
okay. Well, there's two choices from the original series that are kind of cool. BC, you got more for us?
Sure. One of my favorite adversaries is the Sona from Star Trek Insurrection, a movie that is not as loved as some of the others, but I actually really like the villain.
And now they had something with immortality or prolonged life. What was their
yeah kit? So spoilers for a whatever how many year old movie. So we learned at the end of the film that part of the reason they wanted to go to the planet where everyone gets to be young forever is that they were originally part of the people that colonized that planet, and ever since they've been kicked out, they're getting old. They don't like that, and they wanted to take it over so they could steal all the youth-causing energies from it. But since they got kicked out at the end, that raises interesting questions about, what are they doing now? Are they seeking out other ways to try to prolong their lives? Are they trying to usurp, the people who are keeping them away? And like, what other plans do they have? It's also established that, in the context of the film, that they have very little scruples, and so they are willing to play around with technologies that the Federation has banned. They're willing to, enslave other species to make them do their bidding, etc. Like, there's just so much that's obviously evil about them that A, I think they could be a real threat, and B, you don't even have to, I don't know, come up with an excuse for why they're being so obviously treacherous, etc. Like these days, it's if you're in the TNG era, for example, like sometimes you have to justify why are the Klingons, who are otherwise trying to keep peace with the Federation, why is this one particular Klingon ship willing to risk all-out war by attacking something, etc. But the Sona, oh no, like they're just treacherous.
They're just addicted to Botox. They'll do anything to get their Botox. Don't worry, I'm in California. They exist, people.
Exactly.
The Sona exists. Let me just touch up a little bit here. Okay, I only have one more left. Jim, do you have another one?
Well, I was just going to say about the Sona. I remember when we were working on the it was either the Alpha Quadrant book or the Delta, or no, either Alpha or Gamma. We got a chunk of Sona stuff into one of those two books. I don't remember which one now. Probably the Gamma. I think the Sona are a underused and underappreciated species that you could tie into the Dominion War, because I think there was a little bit of lore. I mean, because insurrection happens during the timeline of the Dominion War, even though they didn't really touch on it in the movie. You got the Badmiral in Dougherty, and then you got the Sona, causing problems in the Briar Patch and whatever. But I think if you like BC is saying, like if you need a reliable go-to, just straight up bad guy, like the Sona are a good choice because they got cool technology, they got cool ships, they got the funky stuff going on with their own problems with the face and the metallic Botox or whatever. Not that I would ever want to say a species is all bad or all good, but like if you need a quick and easy adversary, put the Sona in there and just have fun with it. That being said, though, I would love to see a player play a Sona as a player character and get into that whole redemptive kind of thing. I harken back to that episode we did ages ago about redeeming Dukat and Kai Wynn, and like, okay, so play a Sona, representative to the Federation or whatever, and rehabilitate that species and that character and see what you can do with it. I think that would be a fascinating exercise in RPGing. I don't know that anybody would want to go for it. But
what would their value be? Like, I despise plastic surgery, or
I don't know. It just maybe they could maybe their whole arc could be developing diplomatic relationships with the Baku and trying to bring the Son'a back to the Baku and come up with a happy Trekkie kind of resolution to that. I don't know. There's ways to play with it.
I got the value: aging gracefully.
There you go. Good one.
Yeah.
Or I want to age gracefully or something like that. Yeah. I don't know.
Good. So, Jim, do you have another one and done?
Oh yeah,
I have only one left. So.
I don't remember the name of the species, but in the episode, it was the Next Generation episode where Riker is doing a play, Frame of Mind. I think it was Frame of Mind, where he's doing this play, but he's also being abducted every night and is being experimented upon by aliens who are in a phase shifted part of, like, they're on another layer of reality. And so, like, he wakes up tired every night and he's exhausted and cranky and he's got bags under his eyes and stuff. And at first I think it's just because he's working so hard on the play, but it actually turns out he's being abducted every night and being experimented upon, and he finally figures it out. Is it Frame of Mind? I'm pretty sure it's Frame of Mind. I don't remember the name of the species, but again, this is another opportunity to do like a one shot, dropped into your campaign or whatever. If you need to shake up your players, do something a little different. Maybe it's one of those nights where a couple of your players can't make it. You pull this mission brief out of your cap and go, okay, we're going to drop this crazy species into the game. And maybe they got some information from Riker, but they want more, so they're going to go do it again. They're going to go to another ship, whether it's Federation or Klingon or Romulan or whatever. Like, maybe you're playing a completely different campaign. You can still use a species, right? They're not limited to just experimenting on the Federation. Maybe they could go grab a Ferengi and poke and prod at them and see what makes them tick in comparison to the Federation, the information that they got from Riker. So that's one of the species I would have fun with.
Tonians.
Is that what they were called?
Yeah, okay. That's such a mind trip episode. I love it.
I loved it. Oh, it was such a great. That was one of the episodes that I watched that I really appreciated how good of an actor Frakes was, and how challenging it is to have an ensemble show but still give everybody opportunities to do something really cool. Like, I think a couple of those actors were just wasted, or not given enough meaty stuff to really realize their full potential. But that was a great Frakes episode, and I thought he did great with it. I really enjoyed it. What else? Let's do some more. This is fun.
BC, what did you say? I missed it.
I said, give us one of yours. You said you have one more.
Yeah, okay.
You said you had another one.
Okay, my last one is going big on this one, and I want to see the return of V'ger. Especially, let me tell you what I think Discovery missed a huge opportunity to have V'ger. In fact, I was hoping that 10C was something connected with the V'ger when it first came on, and they missed a huge opportunity that would have really placated Grognard fans like me. They could have made it the next evolution of V'ger, the 10C. So that's one that I would. In fact, I think I have some mentions in some of the writings I've done in the STA books, referencing possible things you could do with V'ger, like as some prompts that I put into the stories. But that's something that I think would make great exploration for like a 2-episode or 3-episode game.
Yeah.
So the one thing that jumps to my mind about that is that Star Trek Online has a whole storyline involving mirror universe V'ger. So that's an idea that has some interesting potential on it.
Oh, so could you pull some graphics from that from your game then?
Indeed.
I would have to go back and reread the novelization because it's been a while since I've read it. But I think that was one of the things that disappointed me about the ending of the motion picture, is that, like, V'ger was this huge threat, had all of its little things in orbit around the planet, was ready to completely obliterate Earth. and then Deckard and Pro Bylea united, and then Vidra just kind of disappears. Like, what happened? Did the whole thing like evolve into something different and they never saw him again? Or, I mean, because like it was this massively huge, gigantic thing, right? Like however many AU in diameter or whatever, it just doesn't just go away. And then you see a shot of Earth, and there's like no V'ger anywhere. And there's not even a throwaway line of dialogue saying, oh yeah, it took off and went off to the Beta Quadrant or something like that. It's like, where'd it go?
But that's perfect. But that's perfect for a game master
exactly,
or a play.
Exactly.
That leaves you material. Like I had written, and I remember what I wrote. It was called Son of V'ger. And basically what it did, it grew almost like the law of regression. I don't know if you're familiar with the law of regression when it comes to probability mathematics. It got so big, it had to come back and start at the small again. So Son of V'ger comes back as a person who now encapsulates all of V'ger's knowledge, but kind of starting again, Son of V'ger. So I think that leaves the fact that we don't know what happened to it, at least game masters and players with wide berth to do whatever they want.
Yeah, I kind of imagine that what happens at the end of that film is that sort of technology that V'ger has to like just digitize physical things was applied to itself, and that led into the pattern and energy that it used to evolve into the next plane of existence. So that's why it all goes away. But as soon as you raise that, like there's a part of me that's kind of like, but did they manage to do that 100% effectively for everything? Like, were there little bits of V'ger that were left behind? Did Section 31 Joe go out there and try to collect them all? And who knows? Like, there's lots of interesting potential there.
Or do the Binars stumble across it in their research, right? Binars could easily make interface with V'ger.
I guess so. As soon as you said that, I'm like, why weren't the Binars on my one and done list? But they're now no longer one and done because they reappeared on lower decks.
Well, I'm out of ideas. Jim, you have any more?
I've got two for you, and I'm going to kick myself for not remembering the episode name of Next Generation. I think it was a first. I mean, first season was so all over the place. But there was an early episode of Next Gen where there was a diplomatic thing happening on the ship, and you had the Antikens and the Slan diplomats, and they had to set up like separate rooms for them with like all the proper details. And I think one of the species ate the other species or something like that. I don't remember all the details, but the Antikens like they had such cool makeup. Both of them, and it'd be really neat to have a player character of either of those species involved, or even just an NPC, I guess. But I'm not going too deep into detail on it, obviously. But I think the Antikens and the Slans were kind of cool, but you only ever saw them once, and I don't even. One of them may have ended up on lower decks in the background somewhere, but I don't remember if it was actually meant to be them or not. For the purposes of this anyway, I think they were one and done. And it's those little touchstones. I think it's those little touchstones that make Lower Deck so good, right? Is because it does those deep cut references to Star Trek's past and brings a new flavor to it. Like the Pakleds are a great example. Of course, I'm a big Pakled homer, but the fact that McMahon and his team pulled on the Pakleds to be the big bad for the first couple seasons, like who saw that coming? Nobody saw that coming. And then so as a game master and a group of players, right, do something like that. If you want to shake it up, do something fun and different. I mean, what could you do? You could take one of the Zindi subspecies and blow that out into your big adversary, or take the Sona and do that, or really dig into some of those early season Next Gen, early season DS9 episodes, and just grab a one-off species that no one would expect to be a significant Tosh, yeah, Tosh, or even the dudes that were hunting Tosk, right? Or one of the species I really enjoyed, and I think we got it into the Gamma book, the Dosai, right? They had cool makeup, right? It was that guy from the X-Files, Brian Thompson, was one of the two Dosai, and they had cool makeup, and they were like, both the actors were like really aggressive but really confident, and they weren't evil for the sake of being evil, but they were like, they had stuff going on, and they had connections in the Dominion and in the Gamma Quadrant. And like if you were to do a dedicated Gamma Quadrant campaign, maybe even before the Federation shows up, and just do the whole politicking with the Dominion and make the Dominion the big bad. Like you're doing stuff, and watch out, the Vorta are going to come, and if the Vorta are just the first wave, and like if you mess up your relationship with the Vorta, what's coming next. The Jem'Hadar are going to come in and clean house, right? So there's a whole campaign there that you could play with. But the Docai were fun, and then what was the Docai's connect? Was it the Karima? The Karima was what the Ferengi used as an intermediary to the Docai, I think. I don't remember.
It was anyway, the Karima. Yeah, you're right. Karima.
Lots of one-off species in the Gamma Quadrant, just ripe to be exploited.
Two thoughts about the Antikens. So thought number one is, I think we see both the Antikens and that other species in the background in this latest season of Discovery, which is kind of cool. But also, like, when the FASA Next Generation book came out the first time, they didn't have very much material to go on. And so those were species that were actually highlighted in that FASA book, which was kind of interesting.
Oh, that's cool. So if you get your hands on that, you get a little bit more world building.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Not that I'm suggesting that you should go out and buy a competitive Star Trek RPG.
It's not a competitive anymore.
This is true.
All right. It's now additive.
Indeed.
We build off that greatness is what we do. Is right, Jim?
Absolutely. And actually, this is the old this is the next gen first year source book that FASA. This is one of the last products FASA created before they lost the license. And actually, they were drawing on the first season, the first few episodes of the first season, and I think they got a little section here called New Races. And I think some of these are literally are perfect for this episode as one shot. They got the Angelites from Angel One, which I guess would be what's his name, Groppler Zorn, and then you got the Antikens, and you got the Soleil, you got Binars. Of course, we've seen more Binars. The Bandy. Oh, no, Bandy. The Bandy. That was Groppler Zorn was the Bandy. Well, Betazoids. Those aren't one-offs. The Edoans. I don't remember the Edoans. I think that was that Code of Honor.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, that was something else. Anyway, so those of you who are curious about RPG lore and the glory days of FASA, see if you can find yourself a copy of this. They're not that expensive. I think the last time I looked on eBay, these were like $10-12 or something. They are not highly sought after, to the best of my knowledge. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, and I also invite people to look at continuing missions, where a lot of our bloggers have taken these one and done species and done their best in order to try to convey what those species traits are and characters. So players, if I'm the type, I don't know why I end up playing humans when I do RPG, because I think I will always want to like embody that spirit. But if I wouldn't do that, then I'm going to go run and grab a one and done species so that I don't have any canon to worry about, and I can just riff off of that. All right. Anything else, as we're already at the hour. We have no trouble riffing on stuff like this. BC, any additional?
Yeah, I'll just mention two that I like. One I think is a bit more fleshed out than the other. So the Deltons are one of the species I find really fun. They're actually now no longer one and done, because we saw them show up in season 2 of Picard. I think Agnes Jurati is having a conversation with a bunch of Deltons around a dinner table at some point. But it felt like there was enough fleshed out about that species that you could run with that and figure out what are the next interesting things about that as a species. So in the campaign where I'm a player, I play a Delton captain, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about that particular character.
Can we talk a little bit about Deltons, a little bit more on Deltons too? Like, I want to see a mashup between a Delton, an Orion, and a Betazoid. Like, what would those trio look like if they were on a team together? Like, I would love to see a campaign with those 3 characters playing off of each other.
Say more about that.
Well, think about it, right? We got the Deltons who have pheromones of some sort, right? And then we have no Orions. Definitely the females have pheromones of some sort. And they got the Betazoid who are empathic and telepathic. And if you had 3 really good role players, playing that, and then you put them into certain situations. Maybe they're a negotiation team or an investigate. Maybe they're a Section 31 group or something like that. I mean, it's almost like playing an X-Men campaign at this point, where you have all these, telepath impact mental powers going on. I just think that would be a fascinating campaign.
I think part of what interests me about you saying that is I recognize that a lot of the ideas that Gene Roddenberry used for The Next Generation were lifted from his original plans for Star Trek Phase 2. And so I know that Riker and Deanna Troi basically are slight revisions to the original plans for Decker and Ilea. And so in many ways, like the Betazoid and the Deltons, the Betazoids and the Deltons are sort of inhabiting many of the same sort of idea space. They're both empathic species. We see evidence that they're, free-spirited species, etc., with Lwaxana Troi. And so it'd be interesting to say, okay, recognizing that they started with the same source material, what makes them different now? Like, what is the way that you distinguish them from each other?
Yeah, and would they cancel each other out too? Like, would that make them more powerful that they cancel each other out? And don't even talk about throwing in an Elorian in there just for fun. Like, what would that kind of game look like? I would say if I have players who are like big into superheroes, but they're willing to try Star Trek out, I might do that and let them be kind of the superheroes of the Trekverse.
And then I have one last one. I think we've only seen one instance of this particular species, and the species doesn't have a name. But if I say the line, Genesis allowed is not, it's planet forbidden. Don't you want to see more of that species? I want to see more of that species.
Like, I forgot the alien with a list.
Most colorful alien that they've ever had.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a great one. I think the last one I can think of is related. No, I mean, not directly related, but just thematically in Star Trek 6, when Kirk and McCoy go to the Rurapente, and Kirk is fighting this one alien. He kicks him in the knees, and it's not actually his knees, but like he had such great makeup and like purple and different tones of color. Like, that species is really cool. That guy's got some interesting, or that character's got some interesting stories, whatever it is. But just like that's that reminds me of like all the random aliens that are in the background of the Federation Council scenes in Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4 that FASA especially managed to pick out and create some world building around. That wacky species in Rurapente that Kirk fights, that would be a cool representative, because like it was tall and it was big and menacing, and yet it had this huge weakness that they didn't really make any effort to cover up, right? Which is interesting choice. Like, is that a species choice, or is that a character choice, or like why would you leave your vitals so vulnerable? Like, who knows, right? And
you mentioned the one time we saw the Kamaloid too, Iman's character. Right. What a great species to pick up as a Kamaloid, who was also in that scene. And he had a name, by the way, that giant, because, and BC will probably know it. I'm telling you, I walk around saying it all the time to my wife, because she goes up to him when she says, get off of them. And she says something like, Gren, talk to, or something. And I usually know it. Do you know, BC?
I don't know that one, I'm afraid.
Okay. So I've repeated it enough that I think his at least I know his name if I don't know his species. I think his name is Gren, but I'll have to look it up.
Oh, we're such geeks. I love it.
But here's the idea that immediately jumps into my head. It's like, okay, so if he has this vulnerability, maybe if you met them outside of a prison, they would have armor or, some way of defending themselves so that they don't have that sort of vulnerability. And the fact that they're exposed has everything to do with the fact that character is in prison.
I love it.
This is how world building starts.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm of course, you guys keep talking. Oh, there it is. I found it. Grandog is his name. She goes, Grandog Erente. Grandog Erente. That's what she says. So, and in the script, Grandog is capitalized. So I'm going to guess that's his name is Grandog. So there you go, Jim.
There you go. Yay, internet. The fount of all knowledge helps us with our riffing. I love it. Anybody else got any more go-tos before, or are we going to wrap it up here?
Yeah, we can keep going. Go ahead, BC.
We can
go all night, but we'll let BC do the wrap up comment for us.
Well, just wanted to say, like, you broached something which I think is an interesting case. So there are a lot of species that sort of appear in the background and we never really learn anything about them except for the way that they look. And there's a lot of stuff you could do with that. But when I was trying to come up with these one and done ideas of my own, I was trying to think, we had to know at least something about them, like the Chalon. I think Chalon is the most distinguishing name for them. They're the sort of box turtle, snapping turtle species that appear in the motion picture. Like, there was marketing material about them. I'm not even sure you really see a good image of them in the actual movie itself, and they certainly don't do anything in the actual movie itself. You can imagine a lot of really cool stuff about that, but there's no real canon to hang on that. And so in some ways, like, I tried to exclude those types of species.
Well, and I appreciate the 2E, like, especially I noticed the Modiphius in Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition is pushing in to those species we saw in the background, whether it's the Aeolians or Arcturians, I think are the species that Jim, you're letting people expand on just because we saw a glimpse of them, but hey, throw it into your game. So there's some opportunities for people.
And I think that's something that Discovery did well, is that rather than constantly create brand new species to populate the backgrounds, like, they went back and they found all of these underused species from the past, like Betelgeusians and what have you, and just populated the background. The Saurians is another really great example. Like, the Saurians actually become characters that speak and have lines, and we learn a little bit about them as a culture in Discovery, and we never learned anything about them when they first appeared in the motion picture.
I really appreciated that Discovery brought back the Barzan. I thought Commander Nan was an awesome character, and it harkened back to that Melora episode of DS9 where the Barzan were introduced, and I was like, oh yeah, just more. Wait, did I get that right? No, Melora wasn't a Barzan. Where the heck were the Barzan? Jeez, I'm losing my brain. They were present in an episode prior.
They were TNG.
TNG, that's right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have to turn in my card here.
Well, there we go. People can comment on this episode in YouTube or on the podcast and tell us what species you would want to see one and done and bring back. And of course, if you can't find them on continuing missions, we're happy if you write it up and we'll slap it on there. It doesn't have to be wonderful. You could put it in MS Word or PDF. They don't even need a picture. Just tell us what episode they appeared in. Because as you can see, there are a lot of people like myself, BC, and Jim who can talk about this all day and our minds can riff. I'll tell you right now, just as a writer, it's wonderful when you have a little gem like this to play off of, because it just establishes your story a little, just roots it into Trek, which is really good. All right. What a great episode. BC, you always suggest the best. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Cool. All right. So let's do our gratitude at this point. I am going to thank the shroomies. This is the first time I'm ever thanking a non-person, but I guess I could if I wanted to, and I had done the research really well. I could have done the creator of the shroomies. I'm actually going to thank Steven Spielberg, because last week or 2 weeks ago, I went ahead and watched Space Odyssey one more time, Close Encounters of the Third Time. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I went and rewatched it, and what a well-written show. So I have to give it to these sci-fi people who push it forward and tell good stories that stand the test of time. That movie is over 48 years old now, 47 years old now. I think it came out in 1977, right? So it's 47 years old, and it stands the test of time. So thank you for great writers who seed these stories. BC, your gratitude?
Sure. So recently, I was actually rewatching Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and as we get that first glimpse of the Enterprise, immediately my mind called up Thomas Moroni's introduction to Utopia Planitia, which I think is possibly one of the most beautiful introductions I have ever read. So I just want to give some awesome love to Thomas Moroni.
Go Thomas, one of our faves. Jim Johnson, close us out, sir.
Always grateful for Thomas and all of his efforts. Yeah, great shout out. I want to thank a local store here in Virginia. So I think I mentioned at the top of the show that my family and I kind of went on a quasi vacation last week to Richmond, which is only like 2.5 hours away, but it was just an opportunity just to get out of the house, get out of town a little bit. And because last weekend it wasn't just the Origins Award, it was also Free RPG Day. I took a bunch of copies of the STA second edition quick start with me just to see, hey, because we put my son in a summer camp, day camp down there just for the week, and then my partner was working at the hotel, and then I was free to just do whatever the hell I wanted. So I took it upon myself to visit some local game stores in the Richmond area, and just chatted with the clientele and the customers and kibitzed, and I gave them a few copies of the quick start just to say, hey, free RPG Day's coming up, and showing the love. So I want to shout out the staff and the customers at One-Eyed Jack's, but it could be One-Eyed Jacques. It could be One-Eyed Jaques. I'm not, because it's spelled Jacques, but I don't know how they pronounced it. It could be Jax. It could be Jaques. It could be Jock. There's a few different ways to pronounce it depending on how Shakespearean you want to get. But especially, I want to thank Bo and Sam for being so helpful. They were the staff there that evening. They were super excited to see the quick start, and they were super helpful with me and my family picking out a new game to try. So we bought a new board game called Flame Spirit, Flame Strike. It's a super cute board game with little dragons, and you're building a town and you're trying to make arts and crafts and stuff. It was super cool game. We played it on Sunday. But thanks to One-Eyed Jacques or Jakes, I guess, maybe Jax, I don't know. However that store is pronounced. Thank you for your hospitality. Thanks to Bo and Sam. Really appreciate you. And then also thanks to all the fans who were out there this past weekend, running Star Trek Adventures at your local game stores and at conventions, celebrating either Free RPG Day or just celebrating the fact that you're running Star Trek Adventures. Thank you for the support. Thank you for talking about it online. And thanks for your support, because without you, we wouldn't be doing a second edition. We wouldn't be doing this show 8 years in, all that great stuff. So thank you, fans. And thank you, Michael. And thank you, BC, for another awesome episode.
Jim, before you bounce off, I don't know if you saw my continuing missions blog about Sean Gore, who was one of the first writers for Remnants. And he's the co-owner of Games of Berkeley, where I went for Free RPG Day and passed out the quick starts and stuff like that. So that was a weird connection that he was like, oh, I wrote for them. I'm like, what? And I was like, oh, we took this picture together. It's online. And then, which was really weird, is somebody was visiting from Philadelphia and said, they grew up in Berkeley, but now they live in Philadelphia. And he walked into the store. His name was Aaron. So I'm going to shout him out because this is this part of the story that's weird. So I'm sitting there playing the game with the crew. Me and Josh Allen, co-writer of Captain's Log, are sitting there playing. He walks in, he sits down, he says, can I watch you? Yeah. And we're like, afterwards, he's like, I watch your podcast, you and Jim, every week. He says, I walked by the store and I saw you. I was like, what the heck? Because he didn't know I was going to be there. So I thought that was really cool that he plays with the 10th Fleet. What's it called? The big Star Trek fleet.
Yeah, it's 10th Fleet.
He plays with the 10th Fleet, and he got to sit and watch 2E for the first time. He wasn't sure if he wanted to, but he watched us play. He was so cool playing in there. And I just thought it's so cool that we have this community, including UBC, who, you just never know who you're going to meet. And Star Trek, people who play Star Trek RPG, they know us. It's a small world. So I forgot to thank Sean, and also Sam Spicer, who's the marketing manager at Games of Berkeley, and of course Aaron, who dropped in from Philadelphia and recognized me in the game and joined us, which is super cool.
That's really cool. Thank you, Aaron, for reaching out, and thank you to Sean. I didn't see that picture online, Michael. I'm gonna have to go look for your post now. Gosh, that was 8 years ago. It was a long time ago, back in the early days of first edition. So really cool. All right.
Till next time, the conversation continues. Again, thank you, our special guest, BC, IDIC.
Be safe, be well, live long and prosper. We'll talk to you all next time.